everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here today. We have a very special guest, and he's going to talk. And he's going to talk about ham radio. So I think a lot of you guys here are in the STEM club. This will be very exciting. And then back there, please also say hi to John. Yeah. So if you can just give him a big hand, he can talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Josh Nass. My call sign for ham radio is Kilo India 6 November Alpha Zulu. That is a call sign that's given to me by the FCC. They're the ones that kind of regulate and monitor ham radio in the United States. Ham radio is open to everybody. There's no age limit. You can be as young as 1 year old and get your ham radio license, although I think that'd be tough for a lot of kids. So professionally, I work with satellites and other things like that in space. But with amateur radio, you can actually talk to satellites as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to have an example. Because there's a fun thing going on right now with the International Space Station. There are Russian cosmonauts in the space station right now, and they're sending us images of like past historical landmark and special events that's happened in Russia as cosmonauts. So what is ham radio in a nutshell, or amateur radio in a nutshell? It's all about communication. It's all about being able to wirelessly send your information, whether it's voice or, like I just mentioned, pictures, and send them to another person. Close, long distance, we can do it all with radio. In fact, we all just silenced our phones, right? Those are radios, basically. The difference is that with amateur radio, we use something like this to talk to something like this, and there's nothing in between. It's just the radio waves coming out of one radio and going to this one. For example, Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu, radio check, radio check. So with this radio, with these two radios, I can go 2 miles, 3 miles apart from each other, and we're still able to talk. Kind of like a walkie-talkie, but a bit more power. So humans love to communicate. We've been communicating forever and ever and ever, long before there was wireless technology. We do it for storytelling, right? For lessons, like we're here talking today. You come here for school. You use communication all the time, okay? For example, this is a picture, this is a cave drawing. It's not just the great-great-grandfather of Snapchat, but it's used to inform people, to provide information to them. And radio is kind of like the next evolution of that. We used to have telegraph. Things were wired. We had long wires that people would send Morse code. You guys familiar with Morse code? Dit. And all of this was line of sight. We used our eyeballs to see things. Flags. We'd hold up flags to let people know we were in distress. Or we'd use smoke, a smoke signal. Or we'd use light, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, Paul Revere, right? This was all rather simple, line of sight. You could see what was going on, right? The message was being exchanged 1-to-1, right? You could see it. Well, then somebody came along. His name was Guglielmo Marconi. Marconi was the first individual to create a wireless telegraph. So he took those da-dits that we were sending them over copper wire, and he was able to do it through the air, right? And how he did it was with that piece of foil-looking thing right there. The foil basically resonates, it shakes very quickly, and it sends out this EMF radiation. That's radio waves, radio frequency. So what he did was he basically took this system, put it high up, and he was able to talk over miles. It was the first time that anybody had been able to commercially do that. So pretty big step. From Marconi's first wireless creation, we have everything that's come later. We have SMS, Wi-Fi. I'm using Wi-Fi right now. All Instagram, all of these things come from Marconi's original invention, his first commercial radio. That's actually my son Edison playing on the iPad right there. So everything we have today basically is just an extension of us getting better with radio and learning how to harness its capabilities further. So how does it all tie into amateur radio? Well, amateur radio, as I mentioned, is one radio talking to another radio, or one radio talking to many radios, because when I talk, Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu, anybody that's keyed into the frequency that I'm transmitting on can hear me. So it's kind of like one big party line. It's almost like a voice chat room that anybody can tap into, okay? But the reason why ham radio is still valuable and still in use today is that it's a one-to-one communication, as I kind of already mentioned. That's a cell phone tower, even though it kind of looks like a palm tree, right? Right there. Have you seen these before?
Yeah.
Right? So they look like they're fooling you. They're not fooling you. You know it's a cell phone tower. Have you ever been to Disneyland and tried to use your phone? Tried to post something on Instagram?
Yes.
It's pretty hard, right? Sometimes it's hard to get out, or you go to a Dodgers game and it's really hard because the internet's really slow. Well, that's because your phone, even though it has a radio in it, has a little tiny radio that's very low powered. And what it does is the phone tries to talk to this guy really badly, because what he's doing is he's taking these antennas on the side, he's receiving in your cell phone frequency, amplifying it and transmitting it out over a larger space to hopefully get to another cell tower, and then another cell tower, and another cell tower. And that's how you get coverage. You ever see the cell phone companies when they have a picture of the map and it says, we've got the best coverage, right?
Yeah.
With the red colors and all that. Well, the reason they're doing that is because they have lots of these guys. Your cell phone, if you were to just sit here in this room and call one another, your cell phones aren't actually talking to each other. They're using the cell tower to route the traffic to whoever it goes. So if you send a text message, right, it doesn't just go from you to you. It has to go to the tower and then out. Well, what happens if this goes down? Or you have lots of people that are talking at the same time? Your phones can't communicate anymore, right? So that's why radio, one of the major reasons that radio still exists. We have examples of this, Puerto Rico, right? Puerto Rico just had a really big natural disaster. It was their hurricane, right? Took out all the communication. Florida just went through this as well. One of the first things that got back up and running was ham radio. With ham radio, they were able to call out to the mainland, to the United States, and ask for help to bring medical supplies and whatnot. So it's always there when you need it. When it's busy, the internet's down, anything like that, the ham radio is there for you. Now, I've just showed you these guys. These are pretty simple, right? Just talking. But there's more than that. So with my radio at home and my laptop here, I can send out basically text messages, like chat room in the sky, I call it. And I can send these out, and those green little blips are all the people that my radio can hit. Okay? So just from my single home station with an antenna on the roof, I'm able to transmit all these messages back and forth from my location. Pretty cool. With that said, it gets bigger. So this was yesterday. I was talking to Australia and Japan, and I believe way over there is the Canary Islands from my location, transmitting with the radio, sending text messages. Now you can do this with your phone, of course. You can just call somebody or you can email them, whatever, but what if it's down, right? What do you do then? So with ham radio, you can talk to friends, you can send text messages, you can send pictures, which we're going to do an example of today. And you can do, this is actually, it's kind of to and from work for me, tracking on my radio. This radio has a GPS enabled, so it actually will send out a message. So when I go on hikes, like I like to go on hikes a lot. Anybody go on hikes? You guys go on hikes? Do you ever try to use your cell phone when you go on a hike? It's like dead, right?
Yeah.
Well, radio does, well, sometimes it has, sometimes it does. But a lot of times cell phones don't work because, again, you're far away from the cell phone tower. Radios, again, no problem because they have much more power. If you think about it, this is the antenna on this radio, right? Ooh, big antenna. This radio puts out 5 watts of power. Your cell phone has an antenna in it, but it's coiled up and it's really tiny. And it's only putting out maybe 1.5 watts of power. So this is 5 times as powerful, and it's got a way bigger antenna. So you're able to talk a lot further, communicate further. So right now we've been experimenting with this thing called mesh networking. It's a bit more complicated. We may need to do a second talk if we want to talk about that. But basically we're creating our own Wi-Fi using amateur radio. We're creating our own closed internet. So if the internet goes down, we can use the ham radio internet. And we can send emails, messages, send data, whatever we normally do with the internet, we can basically do with amateur radio. We may lose, Google and ESPN and whatever websites you go to, but what's that? What's that?
Got internet at least.
Basically, you still have the communication, which is the point. That's right. So what's really cool, and kind of what we're going to talk today and we're going to do a demonstration of, that is on board the the International Space Station. And ARISS, A-R-I-S-S, anybody think what the A stands for and the R stands for?
Air radio. Amateur radio.
Got it, amateur radio. So Amateur Radio International Space Station is a group that goes to schools, kind of like this. They may even be able to do something with you guys. And they'll set up a communication, what we call QSO, with an astronaut. And you can talk to the astronaut live from space. And it's pretty fun. If you've ever seen it, it's pretty amazing. What you got to keep in mind, what makes it so interesting, is that the International Space Station is flying very fast. It's flying so fast that if you think about our Earth, our horizon, like where the sun comes up, from the point that the International Space Station comes up and goes all the way across, our field of view is about 10 minutes of time. So you got to go really quick because they're really fast. And what they've been doing, which is pretty cool, they're doing this now. Last night I just tested this because at 4 a.m., I wasn't up for this, but my radio was. There was a pass, and the International Space Station sent out these images. So that is a picture that, as the International Space Station came overhead, beamed down to my radio. And using something like this, which I built for, not a lot, $10, I was able to point it at the sky. Now, okay, this is when you'd use it actively, but if you can just point it, that works too. But you can track as the satellite or the space station goes overhead, right?
That's cool.
Yeah. It's pretty wild when you think about it, because they're, miles and miles up, and you can still receive their signal, which is really, really cool, I think. So what that's called is slow scan television. And we're going to do an example of it, and it is very slow. It's literally downlink. It's turning the picture into audio and downloading it, as they call it. We're literally downloading. So ham radio is always with you whenever you need it, right? Here's me outside. This is actually about 8,600 feet above sea level in Big Bear, California on Bertha Peak. So pretty high up. And I've got my radio, and this is my antenna. And I was able to talk to New York. Here's me with a buddy. This is Yorba Linda, California. We're looking off. This looks like Riverside over here somewhere. And this is my antenna, this crazy little rabbit ears antenna. And with this antenna, I was able to talk to Pennsylvania, okay, on 5 watts of power, which is, again, the same power that this puts out, 5 times as strong as what's in your cell phones. And even Disneyland. And that was the Lunar New Year Festival, and I was able to talk at Disneyland. Yeah, the food was really good. I like the Lunar New Year food. So, okay. As I mentioned, amateur radio is governed by the FCC. It means there's a test. You got to take a test. But the test is easy. There's 3 levels of license. There's technician, general, and extra. And what that does is it gives you more access to different portions of amateur radio. What we've talked about today is all possible with the technician license, which is the first step, the ability to talk to satellites and listen to satellites. You can do with the technician class license. Okay? So let's do a demonstration really quick. Let's try this. I'm going to take everybody smile. I'm going to do a quick little. Okay, good. 1, 2, 3. All right. So now. Oop. Okay, so what we're looking at is the waterfall, as it's called. We're looking at this space of radio frequency, these little jumping up and down things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this over the air to this antenna, to this laptop, which has a radio connected to the back of it. Now, I'm only 2 feet away from this, but you could separate us by miles further than that, and you still have the same capability. So get ready, because it's going to be a little loud. No, it's the speakers. Yeah, you might be a little close. All right, here we go. So it should kick in. There we go. Oh, it's not playing out of those speakers. Okay, you're lucky. It's coming out of that right there, that radio. is like slow text messaging. Yeah. Yeah, right? But we're doing it wirelessly. Wirelessly, yeah. Now I'm using low quality. You can send it much higher quality. Everybody looks really fuzzy. Oh yeah, hold on. I'm gonna do. We can ask as many questions as we want when we're just done with this.
Can you do recording?
Okay. So that was it. Well, now what it's doing, see, there's no signal anymore. So now it's just picking up the white noise. Like you ever turn on your TV and you just hear, that's the white noise because there's no signal. There's nothing for the radio to pick up and turn into something usable, in this case, the information in the picture. So now we just go back to white noise. So I think that was pretty much all I had before we go Q&A. Let me just make sure. Okay, yeah, so who has a question? You were first because you asked first. What was your name? Go ahead. Sorry.
Taylor.
Taylor, ask your question.
So if you're farther away from like the ham radio, does it take slower for like a picture to like download?
So that's a good question. If you think about it, it's pretty interesting. Radio frequency and the waves that we transmit with our radio are traveling at the speed of light. Okay? They're traveling really fast. What happens though, like you saw, is that we can only really pack so much information within. In fact, let me go back. Let me show. I can demonstrate this. Probably very, very easy. So this is another display of the waterfall. When I talk,
Kilo India 6 November Alpha Zulu. This is my data right here. This little slice. It's called your bandwidth. Your bandwidth. The information of my voice is being transmitted out at that bandwidth. Now, if you increase the bandwidth, you can put more data in there.
The image that I was taking is only put out on a very narrow bandwidth, so it takes a long time. That's why I was like for so long, because it was a narrow bandwidth. So to your question, you can get up to a certain point, right? And it's line of sight, and or not line of sight. It can be beyond line of sight, but it's traveling at the speed of light. So it really just becomes how fast you can send out that data, but speed of light generally. Another interesting fact, if I'm here, and we're standing here, and I talk on the radio, one of my more powerful radios, and it's a really good day, the sun's being really nice to us, I can actually have my RF go all the way around the earth and come back to me. So I can talk, and I can hear myself in the headphones because it's gone all the way around the earth and come back. On a good day. That's pretty rare. Anyway, who had another question?
Where does the word ham radio come from? The ham word.
I asked so there's a Facebook group that I belong to. It's called the Ham Radio Crash Course. And one of the questions that they asked to get in is, where did ham come from? A lot of people have all kinds of different beliefs. The most accepted belief on what it came from was, if you go back to Marconi, when I was talking about Marconi and his invention of the wireless telegraph, at the time, everybody used telegraphy, Morse code, to talk and communicate. Western Union, all those major companies, they sent their messages with Morse code. They were professionals. They got paid to do that job. And then all these amateurs started coming in. They were just newbies. They didn't really know a lot, and the professionals kind of looked down on them and thought that they really shouldn't be on their airwaves. They needed to protect their job, and so they started referring to the amateur operators as hams because they would ham-fistedly operate the telegraph key. So they were ham-fisted. Ham-fisted means awkward or clumsy or, not good, right? Kind of bad. So they called us ham-fisted telegraph operators, so now we're hams. Any questions? Yes, what's your name? Hey all, we had a bit of a video malfunction at this point, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the audio play and I'm going to replay the slides. For all intents and purposes, that was the major part of the talk. The rest of this is all Q&A. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. Please think about subscribing. Check me out on Facebook at the Ham Radio Crash Course, on the page Hosh Nasi, on Twitter, on Instagram, and the Patreon. The links are all in the description, and if you'd like to hang out, please have fun listening to the great questions that were offered up by these kids. in the STEM class at the Boys and Girls Club. Thank you so much for letting me go out there. To anybody that's watching this from the Boys and Girls Club, I had a great time. And to everybody watching this, again, thank you so much for watching it, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Joseph, go ahead.
Does ham stand for anything? Like,
So some people do believe, believe it stands for Hertz, Armstrong, and Marconi, which are some of the three most important people to the development of ham radio. That's a nice acronym, but not historically accurate. Any other questions? Yes. Okay. Sorry. What's your name?
my Mario.
Mario. Go ahead.
So a question that I had was, if the ham radio works like that, you can be on 2 different satellites on the other side of the world in space, and you can still send a message.
So that's a bit more complicated. Amateur radio satellites are generally low Earth orbit satellites, meaning they're the ones that pass by really fast, like the International Space Station does. We just talk to them. So what happens is, I don't have a whiteboard, but if I did, I would talk into a radio at the satellite. The satellite would take my voice, amplify it, and send it back down to the ground. Anybody that was listening could pick up my voice at that point, and they could talk back to the satellite. So you could be at home, I could be at home, I could talk to the satellite, you could hear me, and you could talk back through the satellite, okay? Now, your other question, if a satellite's over here on one side of the world and another satellite's over here, this is larger than amateur radio, we're diverging a bit. That is, you got the Earth in the way, right? They can't just talk to each other. So you kind of have to bent pipe, go through something else, which is usually other satellites. So one satellite talks to one, to another, to another, to another, to another, and then you can talk. That's a bit more complicated.
Well, it sounds similar to the cell phone tower theory. If there's not one very close,
On a
it's
much
not gonna be able
larger
to- on a
scale,
much
yeah.
larger
So
scale.
if you wanted to talk to, grandma in South Carolina, no, I don't know if that's where she's from, but you got to go through all the towers in between, or to a tower that has an internet connection, and then it sends it through a wire to get to your destination. Okay?
But if there was no internet, it would just have to jump from tower to tower to tower, bounce, 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 bounce.
That would...
As opposed to here directly to South Carolina.
Yeah.
SMS.
Yeah, so I could go directly to South Carolina with my radio. Cell phones can't, they don't have the power, so you need the help of the internet or the cell phone towers to do it. Question? Another one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, about the cell phone towers, could you possibly make your own cell phone tower out of
Yes.
track and just
Yes, absolutely. So amateur radio is all about experimentation. It's one of the best areas of STEM, if you're interested in STEM type work. That's kind of what I was talking about, that mesh node networking. So what we do is we take old internet Wi-Fi boxes, we reprogram them with our call sign, my call sign, KI6NAZ. And what it'll do is, if you had a mesh node on top of your house, and I had one on top of my house, and we were close enough that they could talk, then we would create one node, one internet. We'd mesh together. And if you had one and then you connected to us, it would get even bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until everybody had internet connection. Kind of like how cell phones work with the cell phone towers, but for amateur radio internet. And we build it ourselves. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead.
So if I wanted to get into it, what are the first 3 steps I would need to do?
Sure. Well, let me go back to the slides because I have a link here.
Are you asking if you wanted to
Get
make your own ham radio?
Oh, make or get your license?
Well, get a ham radio. Like, what are the first 3?
Okay, well, so I brought one. Actually, the radio I used for the whole talk is a Chinese-made radio called Baofeng, and they are about $20 to buy. Okay, very inexpensive. You do need to use some software, which you download and put on your computer to program it, right? But the barrier to entry is much lower as far as cost, which is really good. It allows people to get in. Now, one word of warning, you're not supposed to transmit if you don't have your license. That's technically illegal. You can, however, receive all you want. You can go on here, you can listen to the satellites, you can listen to whatever you want. Totally fine. So $20 is the cost to the Baofeng to get started. I recommend getting your license. There are a ton of videos on YouTube that can help you on explaining more than what I've explained today. What is ham radio? How to get your license? and what you can do with it, because there's just so much stuff you could do. I don't have enough time today to cover all the things you can do with ham radio. Any other questions? Or did I answer that? Is that about right? Was that where you're going? Okay.
Came to my school, a
Mhm.
designer,
Yeah.
and she said you guys were working on self-flying bombers.
So the concept of self-driving, self-flying, like everybody wants to be in that space. It's kind of like a big future market because we have drones, right? We have drones already that we use, and the military uses those today, and they're pretty helpful because putting a human being in something, whether it's a plane or a rocket ship or whatever, is expensive. Not just dangerous, it's expensive because they have to breathe, so you have to have an oxygen system. They have to have electricity because they need to maintain whatever it is they're doing. So you take something that would normally be really small and put it into space like a satellite. If you want to put a human in it, it's got to be 20 times as big and then have all the food and water and everything they need to survive. So the cost of putting humans in space is way more expensive than putting up 5 satellites or something along those lines. Yeah.
Have any satellites picked up some weird stuff like aliens?
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that, it's something called SETI. Have you heard of SETI before?
Yes.
Search for extraterrestrial something or other, life, SETI, but that's an L. So anyway, what they do is they're on Earth, and they use these really big antenna arrays to receive incoming RF. They haven't found anything specifically. They found some weird stuff, but it's interesting.
We found alien.
Go ahead. Yes.
Area 51 real?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a military base. No. Yeah.
Yes. It's a military base.
It's also a research center.
What about Area 51?
Yes, that's correct too.
Is there
I've never been there. I don't know. Okay, one more. Go ahead. Are you talking about the shuttle? Yes, the shuttle. So there's been multiple shuttles, but I believe it's Columbia. I'm not sure, where is it at? Is it the Reagan
Wait.
Discovery Center or something?
No,
It's in LA. Yeah. So that's the shuttle. It only went up to drop off satellites and then come back down. That's generally its whole job. That's what it did. Yeah. They use the ISS for that now. They'll use a small little rocket to put satellites to the ISS, and the ISS will push them out. Do we have time, or do you want to? I'll answer more questions. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Area 51 is called Area 51.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to the other 50?
I'm assuming there's 50 other bases somewhere.
No. So there
I don't know that they mean top secret, secret, secret. It's just the government's sometimes not that inventive with how they name things. So they just went, hey, 50, I got 51. There you go. Okay, thank you. Appreciate everybody.
I'll take a quick photo back there.
You guys know the drill.